All right. We're now streaming.
Good
Give it
morning.
just, good morning, good morning. I'll give it just a second to kind of get us all loaded up. And then I'm sure that we may want to share. So if you are, we'll introduce in a second, but if you're just getting on, share and like the page on your own platform for us. And I'll do the same. All right, and let's go ahead and get started. So I'll get us introduced, and then I'm going to kick it to my co-laborer in this process. I am Kia Jarman. Quite a bit of you may know me from my communication, entrepreneurial work, or community engagement. And but over the last couple of years, I've been working on a couple of really exciting projects, really around nonprofit equity and around Black philanthropy to really close the access gap to resources and funds and opportunities for leaders of color who are running nonprofits, as well as Black philanthropists. And so I had the pleasure of meeting my two co-laborers in this work, Audra Cox, who I'll let her speak in just a second, but she is our staff liaison at the Community Foundation. But more importantly, she is a co-laborer in this process of Give Black, Give Back. And then Lisa Smith Young is also on, and she will share her journey and her conversation in just a moment. But we came together to do this initiative really because it was important for us to gain back access to the word philanthropy, because we are doing philanthropic endeavors. We always have, but we want to make sure that we understand what that looks like and means. So Lisa, I'm gonna throw it to you first, and then maybe you can give it over to Audra to say a few words, and then we can get into the purpose of today.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Kia, and thank you everyone for joining in today. This has really been a great opportunity. It started with a quick question, I think, to Audra and I were having. I was like, when do Black philanthropists get together? When do we have this conversation? And Audra and Kia, and we connected up during Black Philanthropy Month last year, which is in August. So it's every year, August, for the past, I think, 17 years. And anyway, so my involvement goes way back, but even more importantly, in 2016, we sort of went through a really struggling time in our family, just overall, with a lot of deaths and a lot of stuff going on in it feels like deja vu, unfortunately, right now. But that's how the story kind of got started. So my family, my husband and my two adult children and I have a fund called Change We Seek. And so from that, we saw that there's some things that need to happen. And so Change We Seek was born out of that sort of opportunity to do something different, sort of an homage to President Obama. And we are the change we seek. And so in my other life, I work in a pharmaceutical industry, as well as I own a hair care line and an author. So I'm busy, but this is really what it all comes down to. So I'm really happy to be here, and Kia and Audra have made this journey definitely a joy, and we've learned a lot together. And so Audra, I'm gonna let you sort of introduce yourself as well.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, everyone. I just want to say thank you for being a part of this much needed conversation. And I'm grateful to be at the Community Foundation as a piece of the pie, of the puzzle, if you will, of bringing together folks like Lisa and Kia and the entire advisory board that we have, who are working to bring about a change, if you will, and enlighten through education and philanthropy. With that said, I'm going to turn it back to the co-chairs of this event, and let's sit back. Thank you.
Thank you, Audra, for this work. And Lisa, next time, pop my hand when I said Lisa Smith. You know that's not your name, Lisa Smith. That's the slip of the tongue. We have this is gonna be a good time, as we know we get together, so we can joke and laugh and have a good time. Those of you who are following us on Facebook Live, feel free to post your questions in or comments or your own stories in the comment section, and we'll get to them. Today is Juneteenth, and it's really important for us to uplift that celebration of when we began to experience freedom in Texas in 1865. But what you will also see is a lot of people saying free-ish, that freedom has yet not found all of us still to this day. And it feels very reminiscent, I'm sure, of some of the experiences of our ancestors. So Lisa and I wanted to do this. We wanted to have this conversation or this story sharing back in February, and then the world began to kind of do what it's doing now. And so we weren't able to do that. So this was a good time. But we know that building wealth and giving to others is another way in which we can really take our freedom and attain that freedom. And so we wanted to do this story sharing because in our community, in the Black community, we always tell stories. Stories are not, we have so many stories, but when they're oral in nature, which a lot of times they are, then they're weaponized and used against us or changed in some way. And so it was really important that we were able to partner with the Community Foundation also for this conversation to memorialize the stories of our community. So we have lots of types of questions, but a prompting question is kind of, where did your philanthropic story begin? And what do you remember about philanthropy? So we have some guests. In addition to Lisa and I, we have Eric Brown, we have Isaac Adai, and then we also will have Joy Weiss, who I believe will also join us. And when she does, then we'll introduce her. But Lisa, let's start with you. You talked about your family fund, but you also go back in your family relationship with giving for a while. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that story and that journey?
So I come from, I think I shared the other night when we were talking. So my family has the distinction, my mom's side of the family has the distinction of being the most arrested family during the civil rights movement. So we have been on the forefront of the struggle. And so for generations, and before that, my great-grandfather still owns land. We still own land in Tennessee. So he understood what it meant to sort of have money and sort of give back in a way, and also to have something for his family. He says a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. So that's been something that, he gave us from that standpoint. And then my family, the legacy of being freedom fighters, doing the bus boycotts. And, my auntie was at Lemoyne on Owen. And then she sort of started getting involved, and she brought all 14 or 13 of her brothers and sisters into the struggle in some way, shape, or form. So that history of always wanting to give back in some way, whether or not it was wealth, which is what my great-grandfather did, or it was, sort of being activist was one of those things. So this came honestly, I guess, if you will, from that standpoint. We, my family, my husband and my two kids, we put to change the Change We Seek fund together specifically to address financial instability in Black and Brown communities. That seems to be the core of what some of the challenges are. And we felt like our voice wasn't being heard. And so that was how the fund sort of, became to be. And so we saved our pennies and came up with the money to set the foundation up. And so that's how it exists. So that's our story. I know, Isaac, you have a different story of how you do it, and you actually have a story of being your heritage of giving. So even back further than I can go, right? so
Yeah, my family, I talk about it all the time with my parents being from Ghana, but I think philanthropic traditions go back to the beginning of who our people are in terms of us working together to support each other. And so growing up, my parents had always taught us about supporting the community. I mean, my parents probably put over 100 people through school back in Ghana over the course of my childhood and my adulthood, and they did it by pooling funds together using this concept called susu. And so that is essentially where our philanthropic tradition begins. And I took off from there and have done, some other things, which we'll talk about. But yes, as you mentioned, going all the way back to our early days and the beginning of our work as our ancestors, we've embraced this concept of philanthropy and giving back.
Yeah,
So,
so
yeah.
so go further, Isaac. Is that what you're gonna go say, Lisa?
No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Isaac, and kind of tell us, because we have the pleasure, which this wasn't necessarily by design, but what Give Black Give Back does is really provide resources to the funds that are Black led at the Community Foundation. So we happen to have two people on the call who actually are, or three people on the call who are leading those funds. So Isaac, tell us a little bit about the fund that you have at the Community Foundation.
Yeah, sure, sure. And again, thanks for the opportunity to talk about it. So I'm a part of the 260 Change Fund, which was started at the Community Foundation in 2017, summer 2017. And just to give you a little bit of background, there's some friends of mine who started the Birmingham Change Fund, I think in 2004, and they've done a lot of work in Birmingham. Marsha Morgan, which is one of my engineering classmates from TSU, is a founder, and she just so happened to be in town one weekend, and we were talking about what they were doing. And I said, man, we would love to do something like that in Nashville. And that's where we got the idea for the 260 Change Fund. But also the Birmingham Change Fund is a part of an organization called the Community Investment Network, which is basically a nonprofit that supports Black giving circles. So that's the whole origin. The reason we use the name 260 is we thought about the work that was done in our community in February 1960, which essentially helped spark a lot of the civil rights movement around the sit-ins. So 2 being February, 60 being 1960, we thought that that would be a synonym for change. So instead of a 360 shift in your environment, it would be a 260 shift. The fund is set up to support organizations around health, around entrepreneurship, around education.
Yeah, I love that. We just had our next guest, Joy Weiss, join us. Unmute yourself and come on in and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your philanthropy story and how it's impacted you and your family.
Hey, good morning. Thanks so much, everybody, for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here. So me and my husband, Jacob, we have a foundation at the Community Foundation, and it addresses food insecurity in Nashville. And we started it when we got married, our guests helped us to start, instead of gifts, they donated to the fund. And so what the fund does is it addresses food insecurity in Nashville to help eliminate hunger. And one of the main reasons that we wanted to create it was, so often whenever there's grants or funding available, they leave out, for-profit businesses. Usually you have to be a nonprofit, but a lot of for-profits do great work. So this fund allows for someone that may not have like the resources of like a big corporation, or maybe they're a mom that was at a school that saw a need for children with dealing with food insecurity, where they can partner up with a nonprofit or another organization to get their plan in motion. And so the purpose of it is that we donate a series of micro grants. And one of the grants that we gave out went to this brilliant young man, Robert Horton at TSU, the founder of Trap Garden. And his social enterprise, they help create financial, educational, and address food insecurity in our at-risk neighborhoods by creating community gardens. And then the students can also use the food that they grow in the community gardens, and they can sell it to like high-end restaurants. So it's creating not just giving more food security, but it's also creating a financial literacy component to it.
That's so awesome, because I know Trap Garden. I hope we can, we have Kelly on moderation on Facebook Live, and so I hope we can tag them in. I had no clue that that your organization, or that your fund rather, was able to support that. And I think that that's exactly what this conversation is about, is how we all can do things like donate to our, from our wedding, how selfless it is to do that. Lisa, what are your thoughts about this conversation? I know that you have some other folks in our history who have given up so much so we can have so much.
Yeah, so when we started putting this together, obviously, Isaac can go all the way back, and there's to the continent, right? So this is something that we sort of brought over, and just a couple people. I know a lot of people. There's as Isaac mentioned before, Birmingham is doing a great job of Black Philanthropy. Some places in the Carolinas specifically, there's a big philanthropy group there in the Atlanta area. So some of the major cities have it. And so the interesting part was that people think you have to be wealthy in order to start a foundation, that you need to be, an Oprah Winfrey or a Robert Smith who, was able to pay the tuitions at Morehouse. But it's just everyday people. I think, as Joy just mentioned before, it's just taking those things. And so people like Osiella McCarty. So a few years ago, this was a couple years ago, she was a washerwoman in Mississippi. So Mississippi, washerwoman, right? That gives you the picture. She was able to save $150,000. And before she passed, she was still healthy, and she decided to give this money to the University of Mississippi to help students go to college. And so it got such a huge, following, that corporations started matching funds and started doing some different things. And so it really became an opportunity for her to sort of, she was a washerwoman. So she lived by herself. Well, she lived with her mom and her grandmother, I believe. And then when they passed away, she got the house. So she never had a whole lot, but she was able to give a lot. And I think that was an interesting point. And then another story, that rings out to me is the Black Titan. So Isaac, you mentioned Birmingham, and you mentioned that area. A.G. Gaston was a major influence in the civil rights movement, but we don't know his name because he was a philanthropist. He owned quite a few buildings there. He owned the hotels that the Dr. King and Abernathy and all the people that we know stayed at. And so he was able to bail. After the letter from Birmingham, his money was what bailed Dr. King out to continue the fight. So these are stories that we don't share, we don't know, and we don't know that there's other ways for us to support. So those are just two stories, and we want everyone who's following, and Eric, you can jump in as well, just to share those stories, because I think it's important for us to see. One of the things that we wanted to do with this was just to show the power in being able to give in those types of way, in a tangible way. We give as a community, we have a history of doing this, but we don't tell those stories, and so the power is lost in that. And so this is those are just two stories. And we I don't know, Eric, do you have a story in particular about philanthropy that made you get involved in this initiative?
Absolutely. Kia told me to say a couple, but I'll just start with two of them at least. One was actually while I was a student at American Baptist College, our student government association. I was a senior class president. We also had Dr. Janet Walsh, who was the librarian at the time. And then we also had Damian Durr, who was the SGA president. And what we had decided to actually do was we had raised some funds. We used it for the school. And what we had thought was that we would give that money back to the school, just to kind of set an example of each class being able to give money back to the school situation. While we were there, we were actually talking to the custodian at the time, and she had a few she had a booklet in her hand, and recently, earlier that year, her son was killed. And so she was going through the booklet, and we had all started talking to her, and she said, yes, I'm trying to save up some money to get a headstone for my son. So she was just going through, we all started looking, and when she walked away, we all kind of just looked at each other and said, this doesn't really feel right. Even though we want to be an example of giving back to the school, there's no way that we can actually say that we're about the mission of the school and being a light that shines around the world if we're not even taking care of the people that's making sure to take care of us here at the school. So during graduation day, when I thought that I was actually going to give a check to Dr. Harris, we actually ended up calling her on stage, and we actually gave her the money because we thought that was the best way to actually show that we were really prepared by the school was not by giving back to the school, but actually showing what the school has done for us and making sure to give that money to her so that she could actually be able to buy the headstone for her son. And her son was rather young. He was 12 years old. And so I think for us, that was just the best example that we could show that our school was doing great work. Kids, is it okay to share the other two, or do you want me to wait on them?
Yeah. You know what? I want you to share the other story, but I want to highlight that we've kind of been talking. I've heard HBCUs or names of contributors to HBCUs in this conversation, and I want to really stay here for just a second and highlight that very often, as Lisa said, we lean towards those very large philanthropists in our communities, those faces that we know, and we also lean towards those historic institutions that are more popularized by media or just by the kind of glamorization that we do through shows like the Cosbys and things like that, and living, what's it called? Different World, yeah. So we glamorize this experience of being at a HBCU, and I was not fortunate enough to go to a HBCU, though I appreciated my experience, but I recognize the value and the reason and the quality and the value of, I believe, 116 some odd historically Black colleges and universities across the country. I just want to make sure that today, as you think about giving, because don't think that we're going to leave and not ask you to make some contributions. As you think about your giving, though, think about those smaller institutions. Think about the American Baptist colleges. Think about the Wiley colleges. Think about the places that have a couple hundred students or less, and who've been around for going on close to 100 years. Think about those institutions who have kept our communities going. And that's really what Eric is talking about, is communities that have been silent warriors to our community. And we have always figured out ways to send our students to institutions, but how much greater could it be if they didn't have to struggle so much when they got there, if they could actually afford books, and if they could afford food plans, and they could afford to stay on campus. One of the things my dad in particular taught me as a young person was education is the one thing they can't take from you. And so that was the unlocking of freedom in my mind. Well, as a young child, was I'm going to learn everything I can. And it's by grace that I was able to afford to go to school by scholarship. And so it's really important that we make sure that our students get a chance to go to school and then also have a leg up when they come out of school. So Eric, you can pick back up with your next story, but I really wanted to tap into that. And anybody else, feel free to tap into the conversation, whether it be HBCUs or giving in general.
Absolutely. And yeah, I don't even think I'd be who I am if it was not for American Baptist College. So definitely just the history and the legacy, and then also being a legacy myself. I'm second generation student. Both my parents went there. And even with talking about that, how my parents, both, my father's a pastor, mother is a Christian education teacher. They've always given me a sense of giving, which kind of goes into the other two stories. One being that also, just like Joy, me and my wife actually used our wedding as a fundraiser, something that's near and dear to my heart. Is I used to work for the Children's Defense Fund under a great woman named Marion Wright Edelman. And one thing that she made sure to bring back was the concept of freedom schools, making sure that literacy, as we're talking about education, is something that is a strong code. It takes a village mentality when it comes to education. And so we were trying to get that started here in Nashville. Garlinda Burton and her great leadership really has put that together. It's been around for a long time. But when we first were starting, we were needing money, and we needed to do it really quickly because we decided to do it within a 2 to 3 month period. And I was getting married around that time, and me and my wife was already talking about things that we wanted to do with that money. But instead, we decided to, instead of people giving us gifts and giving us money for our wedding, we decided to instead, all the money that we received, all the contributions that we received, we gave to Freedom School. And though it's not a big amount of money to somebody else, for me, it was very happy. We raised about $8,000 that really helped out to at least help out at least 8 to 10 kids during that summer for the first year. And so we were really happy about that. And Freedom Schools is still here. I think it's being housed right now at Watson Grove Missionary Baptist Church, as well as with other churches. And it was in the Metro Nashville Public School System for a little while. but just the fact of making sure that kids are continuously looking at reading as fun during the summertime, and it really helping out during their time there was great. And let me go into last story, which is a couple of friends of mine, Demeter Knight Smith, as well as, State Representative Vincent Dixie. We're all August babies, Leo babies. Key, I know you're Leo. Shout out to us Leos. We have a birthday, and it all lines up. One of us is born the 19th, one is born the 20th, and one is born the 21st. And so we have the 19, 20, and 21st birthday party. And what we do with that every year is that we raise money for funds. And so there's a lot of great ones. Last year we did Creative Girls Rock. We also did, I think we were talking about doing Creative Girls Rocks this year. We have done NLC. We've done the Equity Alliance. We've also done Knowledge Academy as well. And I think this year we was talking about Creative Girls Rocks, and we're also talking about the National Diabetes Association, or at least looking for a Black Diabetes Association, since we all three found out we are diabetics. But what we like is that we have fun with a purpose. And I think what I've always liked and why I'm a part of this with Kia is because of the fact of, just like she said earlier, none of us are millionaires, none of us are rich. But just like when I was in church, those dollars and $2 have helped feed a lot of families, definitely have helped a lot of people in the community to continue on, and even have made it to where we've had Black banks, had Black colleges, and Black hospitals, and that came off the backs of a lot of workers that had just a few dollars in change, and they've really made it to grow just kind of like a mustard seed faith, and it really went into a large stock. And so very happy to be a part of this, and thank you for asking me to be a part of it, and I love to hear these stories, and hopefully we can really push this in Nashville and beyond for a lot of the stuff that we can do.
So you brought up an interesting point that, Kian, one of the things I'm about data, right? So part of what I do outside of all the other things I do is about data. And there's some really interesting statistics around exactly what you're saying. And I noticed, I think Barbara Gray, her family gave from the chat, gave some land in Tennessee for it to build a school. So like we've done this type of stuff. And so just to share with you guys, just on my side, charitable giving from median family wealth. Now we all know that wealth, right now we're in this conversation about wealth disparity between African Americans and our Caucasian counterparts, and specifically, and how much, it's 10 times the wealth, in a white family than is a Black family. But what is actually interesting is, when we look at Blacks in particular, we generally give about give about 10% of our money. So we tithe, I guess, from that standpoint, but we give money back to the community at a 10% rate, and no one else is even close to us. White families give about 2% of their total wealth. Hispanic families are about 6%, and then others about 5%. So we, by far and away, as African Americans, and this information, if somebody wanted to check me on it, because I'm always about that as well, is the Kaiser Foundation, so a very reputable organization that tracks this data. So African Americans, we give substantially more than what we have. When we're talking about Black wealth, and if we match those two things up, and we talk about Blacks generally having about 1/10 of the wealth, but we're giving about 1/10 away, even though we don't have to give. So I think this notion of being a philanthropist, we have much more. The numbers are staggering. And that number, when you look at that number is about $11 billion a year. And I did say B with the B. So what that means is that we literally give away 2/3 of our, and this is also from another thing, 2/3 of African American families donate to organizations each year. $11 billion in annual donations specifically. This is from the Kellogg Foundation. That equates to, that's bigger than the gross of Spanx and Under Armour. So two brands that we know really, really well, we literally more than fund those every year. And so that just speaks to the power that we actually have. And so to Eric's point, and everyone's point, you don't have to be a millionaire. But what we're talking about with philanthropy that's different is that it's going to a cause specifically, diabetes specifically, going to specific areas as far as education, and not just giving that money away and not necessarily knowing how it goes. And it's really important to give to organizations that are Black led, because we are the people who know exactly what the community really does need. To Eric's point of Black Diabetes Association, why don't we already have that type of thing? So those types of things. So people who are of color, people, Black and Latino and the African diaspora, I think it's really important to make sure when you're giving that you do that. I had a real quick question and it came to me earlier. So I think a lot of people may be wondering, like, I do GoFundMe's. How do you think the difference between philanthropy, what we're talking about today, and a GoFundMe is? I don't know, Isaac, I see you shaking your head. Like, so people are like, if they're confused and they're like, I do GoFundMe. So yeah, how is that different from what we're talking about today?
The GoFundMe thing has become really popular, and I have seen it be a tool that people use kind of to respond to something that's happened, somewhat of an issue. And to your point, our community has always had a culture of giving. I wonder what the number is that hasn't been accounted for. It might be double that 11 billion. The GoFundMe model, we see it work. I think there's some underlying themes around why those have popped up that I kind of have some issues with, but it shows that our community does respond when we need to. But I think what we want to do as a community is look at giving from a institutional perspective. There are ways to leverage organizational giving, corporate giving, to maximize or multiply what we're able to do alone. I think that's something that, we probably want to do more in our community. Sorry, my son is on Zoom over here in school. But we always come together, and when something happens, we show up, we put money on the table. That's a part of who we are. But how do we do it in a way where we're able to multiply that? And I think that's where conversations like this and engagements with the Community Foundation are important, especially at a time today where you have all these companies trying to figure out what can we do. You can match funds. You can put money on the table that we've raised and help us grow it. So while I can appreciate what we do with GoFundMe, I'd like to see our community think about how we leverage more developed structures to help us multiply our giving.
Yeah, and make it trackable, because I know that's what Lisa's looking for, right? But that's what a lot of us are looking for, is opportunity to tap into, like, see a reflection of ourselves. And so when we have something sustainable, so if I can go to 260, if I can go to the website and go to 260, and it's been tagged in the Facebook chat, so please go to that page and give if you'd like to. If I can go to Joy's fund and I can give there and it's tagged, please give to that fund as well. And Lisa's We Seek a Change Fund is also tagged. If I can go there, I can also start to track and utilize that and leverage that even for my own personal kind of wealth portfolio also, right? And that's what we're talking about here too. When you give to GoFundMe, though you are going to get a receipt, it's not going to be tracked in the same way. And so while being reactionary is important in our community, we need to be able to fast move. It is also important that we think about long-term sustainability. And I think that's what you're talking about. Some of that comes from, and we've talked a little bit about church on the call. And so I want to jump into this. My charge and challenge for pastors is really to start calling tithes the philanthropic giving. Because when we reclaim that word of philanthropy, it empowers us to do more and to also see what's really happening. Now, this is not necessarily that we give to the building fund for 50 years. We legitimately start to see things moving through our community. We see how we're giving. We see how we can react, how we can be reactionary as a church body. And so I would love to see that. And so though this weekend is Father's Day, so I'm not going to ask you to change your message this weekend, but at some point I would love for that to be the message about how you really are sowing seeds into the community, and how in showing people in your seats how those seeds are manifesting. Because it's like the quote goes, they tried to throw me away, but they didn't realize I was the seed. And so we're sprouters. I mean, that's who we are as people, as Black people, is that we grow from the greatest tragedies and the greatest throwaways. We are the growth and the change, but that only happens if we start to reclaim some of our power in this space, because we don't have a whole ton of it. And so what we have to reclaim in that way. Joy, do you want to jump in and share Any other thoughts that you might have about your giving and how it's been so important to you and the legacy of your little one?
Yeah, I'm getting emotional, so forgive me if I start crying because guys, like this is like really beautiful, and I'm a super feeler, so it's hard for me to hold in, and I'm just to hear all this Black excellence, and I didn't know about all of these groups, and even though we started a foundation, given what's happening today, I've been going to bed every night struggling with feeling helpless and wanting to know collectively how can we impart some Black joy, and not my name, but some Black joy collectively for our communities. And Kia reached out and told me about this, and to hear all of this that everybody is doing. So often we hear that I hear all the time that we're not doing anything for our community. And I'm just like, I see what we're doing. How do you not see it? And the fact that Kia was able to show me all of you guys, and I'm learning about even programs that I did not know about, that I'm just thankful to include into our legacy. So just wanted to say that how humbled and appreciative and thankful I am to hear from all of you. Just to reiterate what you said, Kia, you do not have to be rich, and just changing our language to say philanthropy. Usually when we hear philanthropy, we think about the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, Oprah, LeBron James, but philanthropy just means giving, and you can be philanthropic with $10. And so our foundation, we're nowhere near the size of Food Harvest, but we were able to bring our community together, and they were able to, some people gave $5, some people gave $500. It didn't matter. The point is, all of that was pulled together. So you can start wherever you are and give, and give to the smaller organizations that are doing great work. I find that smaller organizations tend to have a great return because they don't have a large overhead or administrative costs that they're battling with, but they're really good with processes. They find a way to make $1 out of a nickel, and they just get energized. So these little ones that you're not thinking about, have conversations with corporate giving. If you find yourself, there's a lot of companies saying, what can we do? And Kia said, give some money. And so I've had some conversations with some corporate clients that says the difference between equality and equity, asking them to open up accounts or get loans from Citizens Bank, or hand them a sheet of Black-owned charities and organizations and say, here you go. And that way it helps them. They have access for a call to action, so give to them. I don't want to ramble. I think I'm just more moved by, guys, I can't tell you how much hearing everybody and seeing you all, like the boost this is giving me this morning. I love you. And I just want to encourage you to keep going, because if nobody else don't tell you, I thank you for everything that you're doing. I'm gonna shut up because
Joy, I got to go back and also say that even though you're happy about this, we're very happy about you, because I think I read your story and Jacob's story from the Tennessean, and then what we're so happy about is that I met you two at the y'all were both doing consulting for, I believe, First Baptist Capitol Hill when they was trying to figure out their thing. So just to see that continue to happen, that people are giving, but now it's being recycled into other people understanding and it going viral and pushing. Just know that you were one of the first stories, you and your husband, one of the first stories that I remember with this happening. So also let's make sure to give you your kudos with that as well.
Oh, I love you. Thank you so much. And I just if I can just touch on something he said about the schools. My company works with a program that works with students and dealing with homelessness. And just to continue the spirit of giving, our staff is working together to create a program of where our staff wants to create a foundation of where they are going to pull together resources and money and our revenue and profits to to clear the balances of students that have, where they have like a balance at school with their meals, and they can prevent a lot of kids from walking across the stage. And if you did the hard work, if you put in all the work to graduate, being hungry should not be the reason why you can't walk across stage. And so, you just reaching into your staff, and they have a desire to give, even if they can just give $5 or $10 a paycheck. Our staff just jumped up and said, let us create our own staff giving back program, and let's work to eliminate clear out the meal balances of these Black schools with large minority populations to serve. Kia, Lisa, was that you that shared 11 billion?
11 billion every year. That is literally what so this is the thing. I don't think that when that number always just hit me, and it was just like, it's $11 billion that we give every year. So this is not like a one-time, this is what we're doing. I think, and the reason I brought the GoFundMe, I think part of that's in there because this data was tracked, it's been tracking every year. But the point being is that we don't realize the power that we have as far as to do this in a philanthropy way, in a way that's organized, that can actually change social change. I mentioned earlier that my family has been and is very much still. So, I mean, they are the Lee sisters. You can Google them. They are a phenomenal group of women who are my aunts and my mom. And a lot of the stuff that is happening now is because corporations started to give, and having those foundations available to help make some of the changes. Some of the benefits that we get right now are because of that. And so I think having those Black-led organizations and controlling that type of money, I mean, we don't need the government we have it. This is the thing, we are the change we seek. We have the funds, we have the money. We just have to funnel it in such a way that we can use that to stop food insecurity, to make sure people have resources to do those types of things, but we just need to sort of pull them together. And so that's my excitement to, with you and everyone on this call, is that this is not something that we need to go get, like people like, I don't have it, but we have the money. We've been giving the money. We just need to put it together in a space to where we can make a difference and make the impact. I know someone noticed that, mentioned that Courtney Hale over at Knowledge Bank is doing some really great work as well. And I wanted to shout out any of the people. So if you have these stories, please continue to share them. We want to make sure that people just get together and really understand the power behind philanthropy is really what made the social change in the 60s. The money that flooded into these Ford Foundation, into the Kellogg Foundation, into all these big foundations, the money that we put in and people put in, and we can do the same here, but we can do it with Black-led organizations. And so just a matter if we had access to that money, and we do have access to that money, how much we can really truly make this about equity, and truly get to what we need to get here in the States in particular. So yeah, I'm like super. JC, I think Kia, I don't want to acknowledge you, but I want Kia to sort of jump in and go from there.
So we have a new guest, and we'll get him introduced in just a second. I want to shout out a few people that I've seen. They're on the Facebook Live with us. I saw Miss Paulette Coleman, one of our other advisory board members, Miss Barbara Gray. So she's been sharing some of her stories there in the chat. Marquita Holt, and that was what you were just mentioning. I want to uplift I just got to take just 30 seconds or a minute to talk about Courtney Hale for a few reasons. We just mentioned Nia House Montessori and the work he's doing at the school. One of the things that I appreciate about him is that he and his daughter and really his family developed a banking system to give, save, and share. And it's always about, and that sharing part is always amazing to me, because to see young little people, 4 and 5 years old, knowing that they're supposed to, that the share part is just as important as the save part and the spend part. And so I think that that's one thing I want to uplift. And then the other thing is, if you go to blackgivingback.com, that's how you get to give Black Give Back as an initiative. If you go there, you'll see I had an opportunity to write a tribute about Courtney's wife, Tia. And like Joy, I'm not going to get emotional about it, but I want you to give to that fund, Tia Barbara Hale Fund, so that other children, like my own child, can have access to good occupational therapists in our school system that are culturally adept, that understand that our children are geniuses, that understand that that we need some additional care, not because anything is wrong, but because the system has been developed to be harmful to our children. And so she unfortunately passed away. And so that fund is a memorial fund. And I hope that people will give to that fund so that we can continue the legacy of what she developed. So I appreciate always the grace to be able to share, have personal privilege in that way to share that. But please give, please keep Courtney Hale, who's a huge contributor of financial literacy in our community. Keep him uplifted as a young man who's still pushing forward on behalf of the legacy of his wife and himself and his daughter. So with that,
you don't mind,
Jason,
can I just,
please,
I wanted
Isaac.
to just briefly speak on that. And I really appreciate you guys mentioning it. And as you were saying that, I was posting it. So I put the link to Tia's fund out there. Courtney is my line brother. He asked me to set the fund up when Tia passed. And I thought that it was an amazing way to preserve his wife's legacy. And I think that that's something that we can also look at doing in our community as well. Somebody, passes away, think about how we can use the philanthropic tradition to preserve their legacy and continue the work that they may have been doing with their life and their career. So I'm thankful for you to mention that.
Yeah, no, thank you. Because I think that's just a part of the circle that we have to create when those type of things happen. Everybody goes into go mode, and that was your role in that experience, and I think that's really important. So as you are taking on roles of your family legacy, of your friend legacy, or people who are like family to you, think about how you continue to leverage their legacy over time as an opportunity for many more people to share in that experience. JC, we have a new guest with us. Would you come on, do a quick introduction and share your philanthropy story with our Facebook Live friends? Uh-oh, are you there, JC? There you go. Share your story with us.
No. I don't know if you not hear us.
Gotcha. That's okay. That's okay. Okay. Well, so a couple other things. I saw a question.
My computer and my phone are like behind each other, so I'm trying to. I'm here, but so so I'm the CEO and the CFO of the Dare to Dream Foundation. Can you hear me?
That's okay. That's okay. Okay. Well, so a couple other things. I saw a question.
My computer and my phone are like behind each other, so I'm here, but okay, can I keep going? So so I'm the CEO and the CFO of the Dare to Dream Foundation. So I started the program as a director of dance studies while I was studying at the University of Memphis, being that my major was dance education and my minor was nonprofit management. And so my director of dance study, I had to find a way to merge the two together. And with that, I wanted to figure out a way to bring dance outside of the classroom and give it back into the community. And so University of Memphis, we have what is called a high school day of dance, which is when high school students and dance studios get to come take class from the university for free and get to know and bond with those majors and have those conversations. And I had a mentee, his name is Lee Anthony Douglas, graduated from Melrose, and he was talking to me and, pouring his heart out about what he wanted to do. He grew up in Orange Mound, which is basically like the projects or the ghetto of Memphis. And I wanted to be a professional dancer. And if he didn't be a professional dancer, he wanted to teach. And I'm like, this hit home for me. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm in the process of doing this one thing, but how can I help him in this moment? And so at that point, that's where I created the Dare to Dream Junior and Junior Miss Scholarship Program. So within that, I took him and another female, Bria Lipford, on a dream college tour. We went to Alabama State. We went to, of course, University of Memphis and University of North Carolina, Greensboro, to explore those dance programs. Because when I was in high school, I was that kid that really didn't care, but I did my work. But when it came to applying for colleges and things, I didn't, because I didn't want to go. There was nothing that interested me, because my teachers just threw a book at me saying, here, take this material and do it. But being that, you know, if I would have known that I could have went to school to study my passion or something that would give me joy in studying, I would have went with everybody else. And so with the Dare to Dream Foundation, like, I've literally given 4 scholarships away to 4 high school students. I'm in the process of building to release in the 2021 the scholarship division for college. So it'll be the first year for the college division to give scholarships to those. But I mean, we do a lot of things within the community. I have a project called Project Hope, which is helping others by providing everyday essentials. So I do emergency healthcare packages for the homeless and senior citizens. Star Soar, which is our ACT prep program that I launched this past year with 5 students. Parents came to me, being that I'm an educator in the school system. They were like, my child's scores hasn't went anywhere. And in the school system, like, we have ACT prep classes that we're supposed to teach, or each junior is supposed to take, and it's supposed to help you boost your scores. But to have 5 or 6 parents come to me asking individually, can you help my child? I was a little hesitant about it at first, but I went ahead and, you know, did everything that I could, and those students' scores boosted just from spending time with me for 4 weeks. So I launched that program. But giving is embedded in me. It always has been. My grandmother was an orphan. And so, like, I'm going from being given something that didn't belong to me, or life that wasn't mine, that could have not been mine. It's always been a thing to do, is to continue to give, because somebody gave to me.
I definitely think that's the legacy of our community specifically, is that we know that we're not here because of anything that we did. As usually is by what other people have done. You know, as your grandma prayed, your great grandmother prayed, all these different people sort of put you in motion. And so having the, you know, financial backing is something that we're now saying that we want to make sure that that's also a part of the legacy as well. I think the oral history we've had, but that legacy of giving and making sure that we tell those stories, so that it becomes like something like, you know, Eric, you mentioned that Joy's story inspired you to sort of do the same thing. Well, so we want this to be a legacy, right? So, you know, my kids are part of the foundation. They're on the board of the Change We Seek Foundation. And so there's every intention that they will continue on this legacy. So the Black Philanthropy movement will move forward. So we have a responsibility. And one of the things, another thing of statistics I wanted to kind of point out, that, you know, I was doing some research, and only 3% of the money that's given to these big foundations actually ends up to Black-led organizations. So that's why it's hugely important to support Black-led organizations. There's a comment in the area. It was like, someone's a Black woman in a nonprofit, and she serves the community of color. And she's trying to figure out how to connect, because her personal experience is that the gatekeepers at these large organizations don't entrust they're unresponsive to Black organizations. So that money, you know, you hear about these millions of dollars coming to these organizations, and only 3% ends up back in our community. So that's why it's extremely important to either start your story as far as foundations are concerned, or continue to support Black-led organizations, because that's how the money actually ends up making the change in our community. We have the money. I've already given, you know, $11 billion, but we need to also make sure that we are funneling it to Black-led organizations that will actually make the social change. what was that? A quote I mentioned before, I saw before, that protests are really important as part of the process, but there's also the money will make the moment a movement, right? So, in the moment, that's one thing, but we need a movement, and that takes money to do that. And so philanthropy is sort of a way to do that. Protests are important, and definitely something that, again, my family has been, well versed in doing, and continue to have to support. But we also have to take that moment from that anger and from that frustration to actually make it a movement. And that takes money, and that's where philanthropy comes into play.
Yeah. Thank you, JC, for your story. And what it highlights is that very often we're talking about dollars here, and money is really important. It's also that your time is absolutely important as well, because time, unlike money, does not return back to you. So, when you give your time, sometimes it's just as, if not more valuable, because your time is absolutely precious, as we just was discussing. Lisa, I love the quote, money will make a moment a movement. I really think that has to be elevated and amplified a little bit more, because when we think about organizations that are giving, or people that are giving, we really want to think about the sustainability. I think that's what Ms. Paulette Coleman was talking about, was how do we sustain our organizations? We do that sustainability through making sure that we give through sources like the Community Foundation funds. So I want to again say, go to blackgivingback.com. There, two things you can see in particular. One, you can see all the funds that are Black led, or set up on behalf of a Black person. So go there and look at those funds and see, if one of them is one that you absolutely want to entrust your funds to. They have everything from financial background to dental to education, to basic everyday essential needs. So you can give funds there. The other thing is, if you think that you want to start your own fund, please also consider doing that as well. But you'll also see a list of organizations that is in the Giving Matters system that are Black led, those organizations that have the potential to be given to also. So we want to make sure we make the full circle of, you can give to a fund that is going to give on your behalf, or you can give directly to an organization, so that where exactly who your money goes to. So I want to just highlight, because we only literally have a few minutes left, and I want to be mindful of everybody's time. I want to highlight the ways to give, that I've heard today. You can match. So if you're with a corporate company, or even a small business that's saying, Black Lives Matter, well, let them put their money where their mouth is. Ask them to match funds that you and your coworkers are giving, or ask them to make a contribution. That's an immediate thing that they can do without any hesitation, and they don't even have to post about it on social media. It could just be something internal that they do for goodwill for your organization. Go to the website and give directly to one of the funds, or go to one of the nonprofits, just like what JC is running, or just like Viva Prince, who's sitting in our Viva Price, or Nia House Montessori. And there are several other organizations that are to benefit Black individuals. Before we get out of here, because we've got 2 minutes left, final words from our panelists, and then I want to give it over to Audra so that she can give her information. So when you contact Community Foundation, you have a direct staff contact. So Eric, we'll do Eric, JC, Isaac, and then Lisa, you final word and pass it to Audra.
Thank you for letting me be a part of this. And Kia, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this advisory board. This has been great, just to even hear the stories, and also see who I believe two strong, powerful women. Act 3, I'm going to also include Audra, that's really set this pace for the rest of our community. So thank y'all for that. Again, like I do, which I'm probably going to soon set up now, try to do a fund as well, is that I just try to do anything that I'm a part of, not necessarily for publicity's sake, but just to do some things behind the scenes, because I really do like that quote that money will make a moment a movement. I think that's all we try to do. I'm not really about trying to be seen. I'm more about how do we set the foundation, how do we plant those seeds so that big trees can grow for generations after many of us die. It's about the legacy for me. So that's what I'm always trying to be a part of. But I think the best way to do that is really to think about the institutionalization of how we use our dollars and how we do that. Just to hear that that fact of $11 billion per year that we know on data that we see, and not even to think, just like Isaac said, the rest of that money that we don't know about, that power that we have. We really need to think about that. And I think today, even being Juneteenth, talking about free-ish, talking about liberation, it's definitely a day to really have this educational moment to really say, how do we pool our dollars? I think, Isaac, you said Susu. With that, how do we really start thinking about pooling our dollars together and really envisioning the things that we want to see for years to come? So thank y'all for letting me be a part of this.
Thank you. JC, are you ready to, are you queued up?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Am I behind again?
It's you.
Yes. Okay. I'm ready. I'm here. For me, like being that I'm 30 and the organization is about to turn 4 in December, I'm willing to get my hands in and help and do whatever I can to keep the dream and the hope alive for future generations to come.
Thank you. Isaac, any final words you have?
You're muted somehow.
I don't hear you.
We can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was just saying, thanks for having me. I think that this is great, and I'd love to see more discussions like this. I'd just like to reiterate something that was mentioned earlier. You don't have to be a multimillionaire to be a philanthropist. As long as you have the spirit to give and to support your community, you are a philanthropist. And we have tons of us in our community. I think if we come together, we have a lot of power and we can affect a lot of change.
Absolutely. And Lisa, before you give your final ones, I want people to keep the stories going. So again, go to blackgivingback.com or stay on this thread and share your stories, because we'll share those over time. And then I also want to just call out that August is Black Philanthropy Month. So we will be back again sharing more stories, more opportunities. So stay tuned for that. But just put August, just block the whole month, Black Philanthropy Month, and we will share ways with you for you to give and for you to get actively involved. Lisa, I'm gonna turn it over to you, and then Audra.
Okay.
Joy, did you have anything that you want to say? Yeah, go ahead.
I got so emotional earlier, Kia, with your question. I didn't even address about the leaving the legacy, and this little one just walked in. And I just wanted to just say real quickly about like creating a legacy of giving and putting that in our children. My husband is Jewish, and they instill from a very early age a legacy of giving with their kids. They're called tzedakah boxes. They look like piggy banks. And basically every little kid gets one, and throughout the year they put money in it. And then at the end of the year, that child gets that, and they give that everything that they collected in that box, they give it away to charity or to a good cause. And Kwanzaa, we're a dual culture household, so Kwanzaa has a lot of collective giving, cooperative economics. And so we just put into Gabby of always being able to give without, we don't teach her to set herself on fire to keep someone else warm, but we do teach her that whatever gifts or ability, like if she has a toy, or what happens is if we're out now and new toy. If we're out somewhere and she sees a toy, it's going to be, can we also get a toy for someone else too? And so, just to be able to see that heart of giving in the little ones, I know that our generation the generation comes after us, they're going to be having hearts to give too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, I was going to say that she's really what this is all about. And I think, I said a quote earlier, it's actually from the Bible. And it's like, a good wise man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. And that's really what we're trying to do. You know, my family has been very active in the civil rights movement and moved forward. And so the legacy they gave us sort of gave us the fire to do some of the stuff we're doing. And so I think we have to start thinking legacy. And I think that's, you know, one of the things that philanthropy definitely does, you know, so that we have sort of that legacy of giving and making social change. And Joy, you mentioned earlier that people don't see the Black community as givers. We tend to be the community that always needs something, but this is definitely a place to take in power. So, you know, thank you, Kia, thank you, Audra, Eric, JC, Isaac, and Joy for being a part of this platform. And then Audra, I'm gonna let you close it out with just details if people wanna know the next steps. Audra is our representative there at the Community Foundation. And so I'll let you close it out.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I sit here and like Joy, I became so emotional because I am so fortunate to be a part of a team of individuals like yourselves. I won't say anything else. We all have our time, talent, and treasure that we can share. You said it more eloquently than I could. We are all gifted, and that is our inheritance. The words of the late Ethel Waters. Take the strength from today to get us to make it to tomorrow. Okay? Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you on Facebook Live for joining in again. blackgivingback.com. Keep the conversation going. Keep sharing your philanthropic stories. Keep giving and keep being Black. All right. Bye, everybody. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
You too.
Have a good day.
Happy Juneteenth.
Happy Juneteenth.